Okay, grade 3, let's take a look at our second lesson about God's amazing creation, plants and soils. Now you'll notice that I sent home in your package, I sent home either the green science textbook or a photocopy of the pages that we need because we don't have enough science textbooks. So some of you just have a photocopied package, others of you have the actual book. So just pause this video for a minute so that you can go and grab the textbook and then turn to page 125. It's the beginning of Unit 6. We're going to just read a few pages together. So pause the video, then go grab your textbook and turn to page 125. Once you have page 125, just start the video again and we'll read together. Page 125, investigating soil. Does anybody know what kind of animal that is in the ground in the picture? Of course, we can see the worms. The other one is a mole, and you see how long his claws are for digging. Investigating soil. When we think of God's great creation, we often think about plants or animals. We may think about the rain that God sends or the faraway planets that He sustains. But soil is part of God's great creation too. Plants need soil, animals and people need plants, so animals and people need soil too. In this unit, you will learn about what soil is and how it forms. You will learn why we need it, and you will learn how to take care of this gift from God. Next page. How does soil form? Wipe your feet. Have you ever heard that? Nobody wants dirt tracked into the house. Even though it doesn't belong in the house, soil is an important part of God's creation. Soil is a mixture of rock fragments, mineral fragments, and the remains of living things. It also contains air and water. Where does soil come from? What processes does God use to form soil? Water and wind wear down rocks and minerals into small fragments. These fragments are the beginning of soil, but these fragments alone don't make up soil. Most plants can't grow in just rock fragments. God uses special methods to turn these rock fragments into useful soil. Some types of plants, small animals, and other living things begin to live in the rock fragments. When they die, their bodies decay. This decayed matter is added to the rock and mineral fragments. Leaves, twigs, insect bodies, and turn the page. Bacteria, animal droppings, and rodent hairs are also added to the soil. Matter from living things forms an important substance. This substance is humus. Now, some of you know of hummus, and you like to have hummus on crackers or pita. That's not the same thing. This is humus, which is a type of soil. Humus is the decayed remains of once living things. Have you ever looked under a decaying log? The rich, dark material there is humus. Humus makes rich soil. It has all of the nutrients that plants need to grow. It also keeps the air and water that plants need in the soil. Soil is full of animals and tiny living things such as bacteria. Insects and bacteria add a lot of humus to the soil. Earthworms pass soil and humus through their bodies. This breaks down the humus and adds air to the soil. Larger animals such as moles make burrows. This helps move water and air through the soil. Soil can be either rich or poor. Rich soil is a good place for plants to grow. Poor soil isn't. For example, the soil in many forests is rich soil. A lot of humus forms in forests from the leaves that fall from the trees and the insects and larger animals that live there. You can take a look at the pictures there. Moles and other large creatures make tunnels in the soil. Water and air move through those tunnels and they take humus deeper into the soil. And earthworms pass soil and organic matter through their bodies. This breaks down the humus and adds air to the soil. And billions of tiny living things such as insects and bacteria live in the soil. And when they die in the soil and their bodies decay also and add more nutrients. And you might remember from a Bible story a couple of months ago, we were talking about the the Nile River in Egypt and how it would flood. Remember, I was talking about how this was just before we were talking about Joseph and the 7 good years and the 7 years of famine. And remember, I was explaining the Nile River that would flood every spring and it would leave all rich nutrients on the ground. And that would make the soil rich for growing. And that in the 7 years of famine, the Nile River didn't flood. And that's why it didn't rain and the Nile River didn't flood. So the soil didn't get any of those rich nutrients. And that's why it wasn't growing anything. And it was 7 years of poor harvest and famine. And here we can see an intersection with the Bible, rich soil in Egypt. Genesis 42 tells us of Jacob sending his sons to Egypt to buy corn. Well, we just learned that story because there was a famine where Jacob lived. Egypt didn't have a famine, not at first, right? The flooding of the Nile, which waters the land and enriches the soil, often kept Egypt from having a food shortage. So that's why they were doing so well for the first few years. Next page. Rich soil also forms near rivers. There's even a picture there of the Nile River. For example, the Nile River floods every year. The floods leave behind silt from the river, and this silt makes the soil rich. Soil in tropical areas and on steep mountain slopes is poor because the nutrients are easily washed away from it. You can see the picture on the side there. It's a little bit hard to see in the photocopied ones, but you can see this is on a steep slope or a hill, and because it's so steep, every time it rains, all the soil washes away, and all that's left behind there is a little bit of mud with the roots all sticking out of it because it's all just washed away. Poor farming methods can also result in poor soil that won't grow crops. Some places on Earth have very little rich soil. Other places have a lot. Soil forms at different rates in different places. In good conditions, about 2 centimeters of soil can form in 100 years. That's a lot of time. In dry, harsh conditions, it can take 2,000 years for just 1 centimeter of soil to form. Wow, that's a lot of time. So we will be learning about how soil is formed exactly. Let's watch this short video first.
In this program, we're going to learn about soil. What is soil? Soil is a substance that covers the ground. Soil covers much of the land on Earth and is made up of a mixture of different things. One part of soil is made up from broken down rock. Soil is formed from the weathering of rocks and minerals. Weathering is when wind, rain, frost, and sunlight break rocks down into smaller particles. Another part of soil is made up of decaying plants and animals, referred to as humus. Humus is very important to soil. Humus improves the soil's health and productivity. Humus adds nutrients to the soil. It also soaks up water and keeps the ground moist. Plants and animals provide nutrients to the soil. For example, earthworms eat dead plants and animals. The waste materials that earthworms leave behind provide rich nutrients in the soil. Along with nutrients, healthy soil contains water and air. A plant's roots dig deep into the soil, creating passages for air and water. Healthy soil is one of the most important factors in growing healthy plants. Soil is formed over a long period of time. 1 inch of soil can take 1,000 years to form. There are 3 main types of soil. They are clay, silt, and sand. Clay is made up of small grains. It is dense and usually moist. Silt soil feels smooth and silky. It contains plenty of humus and is the best soil for a garden. It's packed with nutrients. Sandy soil is made up of large particles, and it feels gritty when you touch it. Sandy soil is found in deserts and along beaches. Soil enables plants to grow by supplying the plant with nutrients and water. And soil is home to millions of living organisms, like insects and worms. Soil is very important to life on Earth.
So now in your workbook, if you take a look in your green do-a-tang, if you don't have it yet, go pause the movie and then go grab it for a second. But when you look in your green do-a-tang, you'll see a couple of pages in. There's a page that says all about soil, and it has a picture of an earthworm and a little boy planting a garden. The earthworm is wearing a shirt that says, "I love dirt." I think it's a very cute picture. So the next few pages actually make up a little flip book. So you have 2 choices. You can either just fill in these pages and leave them in your do-a-tang, or if you want, you can take them out of your do-a-tang, you can cut them all out, and you can staple them together to make a flip book. If you do cut them all out, I don't know if you're going to want to cut around every single bumpy edge. That might be very hard. You might just want to cut straight around there. But you can either just fill it in your do-a-tang, or you can take those 3 pages out, you can fill them in, and then staple them together to make a flip book. So, of course, make sure that you color in the title page and even the title page from the whole unit. And if you want, if you have that colored in and you want to send a picture to me, I would love to see it. And if you send me the picture on Seesaw, if you want me to share it with the whole class, just put a note on there when you send it to me to say, here's my title page, you can share it with the class. All right, so you're going to color in that title page all about soil, and then we turn over and our first page says, what is soil? Well, you can see on your screen here all about soil. What is soil? Soil is the loose upper layer of the Earth's surface where plants grow. It is important to all living creatures. Soil covers much of the land on Earth. It's like the skin of the Earth. Soil is the base for farms, gardens, fields, forests, parks, and lawns. Soil comes from broken up pieces of rock and dead leaves, tree limbs, and dead bugs. So then under those pictures, you see it says, copy this into your booklet. What is soil? That's already in your booklet. Then the red is what we want to copy into your booklet. Soil is the dirt that plants grow in, made up of rocks, dead plants, and animals. So I'm going to ask you to pause the video and write that in. I'm not going to wait for you because everybody writes at a different speed. So pause the video, write that answer on your page, on your booklet page. Then once you have written it, you could start the video again and we'll get to the next page. So our next page is, how does weather help make soil? How does weather help make soil? Weather helps to make soil. when the weather gets hot, rocks can get bigger. Can you believe it? I bet you never knew that. But rocks get bigger when they get hot. Now, everything can actually get bigger when it gets hot. Because the molecules, the particles in something, they're getting really hot, so they want to spread out. Now, if we were in class, we would do an activity that I like to do to show this. And I would call everybody up together, and we would crowd all together really, 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 really tight into a big crowd, pulled together as tight as we can. And then we would notice we would start getting hot, and we get warmer and warmer and warmer. And how would we want to cool down? We would want to cool down by spreading out, right? And when we spread out, that cools us down. And the same thing happens with things that are in the sun. And it's hard to imagine. And sometimes it's so small you can hardly see it. But it is true that everything will get bigger when it gets hot. Even things like rocks, because all the different parts in the rock, all the molecules, they get hot, all squished together, and when they're hot, they try to spread out a little bit, and so the rock expands and gets a little bigger. And when it turns cold, all of a sudden, it's getting cold and it wants to get back together to warm up. Same thing with our crowd. If we had our class all huddled together and we separated because we were too hot, then we would start getting colder and we would want to warm up, and we warm up by coming back together again in a nice huddle. And the same thing happens with rocks and other objects. When they get cold, all the particles and molecules all squish back together again as tight as they can to warm each other up. So believe it or not, rocks get bigger and smaller depending on the weather. Not enough that you can see it. It's not like one day if it's cold, it's just a little rock, and the next day if it's hot, it's a boulder. It's just going to be, you probably won't even be able to tell the difference, but it does actually get bigger and smaller. And when this happens often enough, the rock will eventually crack and break up into small pieces that break into even smaller pieces, because those small pieces will get bigger and smaller with the weather, so they'll break up even smaller, and so on and so on. When they get really small, they turn into parts of soil. And rain and ice can also get into rocks and break them apart. You will notice, for example, in the spring, now that we've just finished winter with all the ice and snow on the roads, what do you notice a lot of in the roads when you're driving around? A lot of potholes. Because what happens is the road will have a little crack in it from the concrete getting bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller in the weather all the time, so it'll get a little crack in it. Well, then it will rain. The rain gets into that crack, and then it freezes, and the ice will break it apart even more and make the crack even bigger. And then more rain will get in it and freeze, and the ice will break it apart even more. And that's how rain and ice can break rocks apart also. This all takes thousands of years. It doesn't just happen quickly or overnight. It takes thousands of years to make just a few centimeters of soil. But the weather can turn rocks into little soil or sand pieces. Pretty amazing to think of. So again, pause your video here, and in your booklet on the How Does Weather Help Make Soil page, you're going to write hot and cold weather make rocks break into tiny pieces. So pause the video and write that down. When you've finished that, turn your video back on and we'll go to the next page. How does water help make soil? Well, we already know water can help make soil if it's rain, because the rain can get in the cracks and it can freeze and break the rock up even more. But what if it's just water like a river or something? Well, the weight of the moving water can wear away a rock and make it smaller. Nearly all running water that you see, such as streams or river, carry little bits of sand and gravel with them. In the water as it's going downstream, it'll take little bits of sand and gravel with it. Some soil is made when glaciers and ice grind and break loose rocks. Glaciers, which is ice on the top of a mountain, and then it can break off and come down, slide down the side of the mountain. It can take with it little bits of rock until the glacier melts and it drops the soil off. And water splits and chips rocks by freezing and expanding, and rain wears away rocks and soaks decaying plants and animals into the soil. So in a river, when the water is running down the stream and it has these little rocks that are coming along with it, those rocks are tumbling and turning and tumbling and turning and rubbing up against other rocks and rubbing up against the bottom of the river, and that wears it down and rubs off little pieces and makes it smaller and smaller and smaller and turns it into sand and gravel and soil. And in the same way, the ice at the top of the mountain, it can break off and a big chunk of ice can slide down the side of the mountain and it will take rocks with it. And as it's sliding down, same thing, those rocks are scraping against other rocks and scraping against the ice, and they're breaking up and getting worn down and made smaller, and eventually the ice will all melt and all that's left then is the smaller pieces of the rocks that can eventually turn into soil. So different ways that water can help to make soil. Again, in your book, How Does Water Help Make Soil? You're going to write rain, moving water, and ice all break rocks into tiny pieces. So pause the video to fill in that page on your worksheet. And when you're finished, you can come back and we'll go to the next page. We're going to start with a little video telling us how animals can help the soil.
Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Fun Science Demos. Today, we have a little mystery for you. I have 3 containers that are hidden under black pieces of paper, and 1 container that's totally open so everybody can see. All of these containers started out looking just like this container. They had layers of soil, sand, soil, sand, soil, sand, all the way up from top to bottom. After I had my students set up these containers, I had them add a certain type of animal that always lives in the soil. That's the mystery. What animal are we talking about? After my students added those animals to each container, we covered each container in black paper and we let science happen. And 3 weeks later, this is what we found. Remember, each container started out looking like this. A layer of soil, a layer of sand. Soil, sand, soil, sand. Let's see what they look like now. Let's zoom in and take a closer look and see what is going on. So what do you notice? Each container started out looking like this, and now they look like this. The sand and the soil is totally mixed together. So what animal could possibly do all that mixing? Enter the earthworm. This little guy is the big idea today. And this little guy did all of this work digging and mixing that soil. So why is all this mixing so important? Why is the earthworm so important? Earthworms live in the soil. It's where they get their food and their shelter. But what else lives in the soil? Plants do. Plant roots reach deep down into the soil. And what do plants need to live? Water and air. And what actually helps them get that water and air? Our friend the earthworm. Earthworms dig and tunnel deep down into the soil. Take a look at this tunnel right here. What does that tunnel do? Well, it allows air and water to get deep down into the soil so those plant roots can get to that air and soil. This is such a simple setup. If you want to, you can actually try this at home and see what you find. Earthworms are so important, and we don't even see them at work, but they're hard at work underneath the soil, digging and tunneling, creating healthy soil for plants. Science is so cool. And so is my friend the earthworm. If you want to learn more about earthworms, click on our link in the video description. Thanks for watching. Say goodbye.
Ew, kissing a worm. All right, so how do animals help make soil? Well, they help to make the soil because when they die, their bodies decay, which is another word for rot, and that adds important materials to the soil. So an insect that's in the soil, it will die and it will decay, and that gives nutrients to the soil. Burrowing animals like moles and rabbits and groundhogs help to mix the soil. But the most important burrowing creature is the earthworm. Earthworm tunnels allow water and air to get into the hard soil. As earthworms travel through the soil in search of food, it produces waste that makes the soil more fertile. Remember in the first movie that we watched on Monday, it said that the earthworm just swallows a mouthful of the soil. And as that goes through its body, it takes out all the nutrients and stuff that it needs. And what comes out on the other end is called castings. Different word for poop. Castings are earthworm poop. That waste helps to make the soil more fertile. So in your booklet, you're going to write, how do animals help make soil? Your answer on that page is going to be, digging animals mix the soil and let air and water get in. They also fertilize the soil. That one's a little bit longer, so make sure you pause the video while you write that all down. Then when you have written it, you can start the video again, come back here to do the last page in your book. So we have another video to show how plants help the soil, and this one is a really cool experiment. It would have been fun to do all these things at school, but at least we can watch videos about them.
Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Fun Science Demos. The big idea today is erosion and how water has the power to shape our land. But we don't want the water to shape our land too much because we need that soil to grow plants. We use those plants for food, and animals use those plants for food. So what you see in front of me are three different types of land. This first type is just bare soil. It's just soil. This next type has dead leaves on top. And the third...
Whoops.
Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Fun Science Demos. The big idea today is
start where we were.
This next type has dead leaves on top. And the third type has plants growing in the soil. This may not look too exciting right now, but when it rains, that water has the power to change the land. And we're going to make it rain to see what that water is going to do to our land. So we cut the top off of 3 plastic bottles, and we put the same soil in each of those 3 bottles. All of these bottles have the same soil. We covered this soil with dead leaves, and we grew some plants in this bottle. We've also used other plastic bottles to catch the water that's going to come out of these when we pour it into the bottle. We want to pour water into each bottle and see what happens. Does that water have the power to change the land? What do you think is going to happen when we pour water into this bottle and it comes out into the cup? Will it be any different from the water we pour into this bottle as it comes into the cup? And will this one be any different when we pour water into this bottle and it comes out into this cup? So I'm going to slowly pour water in. You're going to see the water level rise, and we'll see what happens with our soil. We'll keep it coming. And now it's coming out. Take a look at the bottle we used to catch the water. Well, what do you notice? Well, it's cloudy. So why is it cloudy? That's because all the dirt and the soil from our bottle was washed into the cup. The water had the power to actually take the dirt and the soil with it out of the bottle and into the cup. The water moved the soil. It shaped the soil. So now I'm going to pour about the same amount of water into the next bottle. What do you think is going to happen? The water that we catch, will it be just as dirty? Will it be less dirty? Will we even be able to see a difference? Well, let's pour the water and find out. Here we go. So I'm pouring the water in. Making it rain. Adding water to our bottle. I can see the leaves floating to the top. Do we have any overflow? Yes, we do. Stop the rain and see what we have. So we've zoomed in so you can compare the two. This one has a lot of the soil in the container. This one just has a little bit of the particles, a little bit of the soil in that water. So why do you think this container is a little bit cleaner? Well, what's different between the two? Well, this one had leaves, dead leaves on top, and I think most of these dead leaves helped protect the soil underneath from moving with the water. So what do you think is going to happen with our third container? We have plants growing in the soil. What's going to happen when we add water and make it rain in this container? All right, here we go. Let's add the water. About the same amount. Pouring the water in. What do you think's going to happen here? Add a little bit more. It's coming out. We're going to stop pouring and see if we can compare what we see coming out. The water coming out of this container looks a whole lot cleaner than this one and a little bit cleaner than this one. So the question is why? Why is this water cleaner? I poured about the same amount of water into each container of soil. This one looks really clean. Well, to answer the question why, we have to zoom in and take a closer look at what's really going on here. So now we're all set to take a closer look at why the water coming out of this bottle was so clean and clear compared to the others. To do that, I'm going to actually lift these plants out of this bottle and let's see what happens. Well, what I notice right away is what comes along with all of the plants. Well, the soil is actually coming out too. When I flip it over, I think you'll be able to see why. So we've zoomed in so we can see what's going on here. Why is this soil staying together? Why is it staying in place? Well, you can see the roots from our plants grew into the soil, and almost like little fingers, those roots are holding the soil together. So when it rains, the roots keep the soil from washing away. The roots of the plant, that's what keeps the water from eroding the soil. Besides holding the soil together and in place, roots do another amazing thing. To show you that, I'm going to squeeze this and I want you to watch what happens. Where did all that water come from? Well, that came from when we made it rain on our soil. The roots of the plants helped hold that water in. Plant roots actually go deep into the soil, and this model is going to help us see how deep they can go. We're going to zoom in and see if we can see those really tiny plant roots that we have growing in our soil. We've zoomed in now so you can see these tiny roots in action. I'm going to point them out, and they actually extend from the plant all the way down to the bottom of our soil. I'll point out some of the bigger ones. They grow down into the soil. And think about what they're doing. They're holding that soil in place. All of these tiny roots getting nutrients from the soil, but they're also helping the soil out. Plants do an amazing job at keeping erosion from washing away too much soil. We need that soil. We depend on that soil to grow plants, and animals depend on that soil to grow plants. If you want to learn more about plants and soil and erosion, check out our links in the video description. Science is so cool, and sometimes it's dirty. Thanks for watching. Science is so cool, and soil and erosion, check out our links.
So our last page then, how do plants help soil? By sending their roots through the soil, plants break it up, making soil better for growing. But roots help make soil too. They split rocks into pieces that later become soil. Even tiny roots are very strong and split apart big rocks. When plants die, plants decay, making the soil more fertile, and plants also help to keep soil in place and not blow away or not get washed away by water. So on this last page in your booklet, you're going to write, how do plants help soil? Roots break up the soil, hold it in place, and fertilize it when they die. Once you've finished that, you're done your booklet. So again, like I said, you can either just leave it in your green do-a-tang as it is, or you can take those pages out, cut them up, make them into a flip book, and staple them together. And don't forget to show me if you have your title page colored and you want to send it to me to see, and let me know if you want me to share it with the class. All right, enjoy.